consider the bird. You know what a bird is. You've always known. Something with wings, something that flies, something that follows the rules of the natural world the way you follow the rules of your own. Now, imagine a place where those rules don't quite apply. A bird with wings that can't fly. A bird that holds a twig between its beak like a craftsman gripping a tool. A bird that drinks blood. Warm, fresh blood from a much larger creature that simply stands there and allows it. And somewhere on a sun-scorched rock, just miles from the equator, a penguin blinking slowly in the tropical heat. All of them real, all of them living in the same place. You are about to visit the Galapagos Islands. And at first, it will feel familiar. It will feel like a world you understand. That feeling won't last. The Galapagos unsettles you before you can explain why. Located near the equator, about 600 miles off the coast of Ecuador in the eastern Pacific Ocean, the Galapagos are a collection of 13 major islands and over 60 smaller islands. The ground there is volcanic rock that looks freshly burned, stretching to the horizon like the memory of a fire that never went out. Fresh water is scarce. Shade is a rumor. Life, where you find it, seems to be clinging on through sheer stubbornness. These islands didn't rise from some ancient coastline. They erupted, burst from the floor of the Pacific. And most of what lives here arrived the same way the islands formed. Violently, accidentally, against all reasonable expectation. Birds blown off course, animals adrift on debris for weeks with nothing ahead but open water. A few survivors washing ashore on rock that offered almost nothing. But here's what wasn't waiting for them: predators. For long stretches of time, these islands had almost nothing hunting birds on land. And that absence, that single quiet absence, changes the entire logic of survival. When nothing is chasing you, flight becomes expensive overhead. Fear becomes unnecessary. Behaviors that would be fatal anywhere else become here merely unusual. The birds that landed didn't just survive, they began to drift. One generation at a time, quietly, away from what they had been. Not into something entirely new, but into something just familiar enough to disturb you. Like a photograph of someone you know, taken from a slightly wrong angle. In 1835, a young English naturalist stepped ashore and saw nothing remarkable. Charles Darwin was 26, seasick and unimpressed. He collected birds with dutiful efficiency, not yet knowing what he was holding. They looked ordinary. Small finches, varying beak sizes, nothing announcing itself as world-altering. He almost missed it entirely. It wasn't until later, back in England, specimens spread across a table, that the pattern surfaced. These birds were different species, genuinely distinct in beak and behavior and diet, and yet they were all closely related. All descended, apparently, from a single ancestor that had arrived on these islands, and slowly, impossibly, became many. One developed a thick beak for cracking seeds. Another grew a long, probing beak for hunting insects. A third learned to do something else entirely, something we'll return to. Today, they are known collectively as Darwin's finches. And the pattern he observed planted a seed in Darwin's mind that grew into one of the most significant ideas in human history. species are not fixed. They bend, they drift. Given enough time and pressure, the ordinary becomes something you no longer recognize. He called the mechanism natural selection. What the Galapagos showed him was what it looks like when that mechanism runs without interference. The result, as you are about to see, feels less like science and more like science fiction. On the lava shores of Isabella and Fernandina Islands, there is a bird that will stop you cold. At a distance, it looks like any other cormorant you may have seen before. Long-necked, dark-feathered, hook-beaked. Built in every version of the world you know to dive from the air and plunge into the water. So you wait for it to take flight. It does not. It cannot. This is the flightless cormorant. It holds its wings out from its body, not in preparation, but almost as though it has forgotten what they were for. The wings are small. Wrong. Roughly a third the size they should be, vestigial and ragged, like a sentence that trailed off before it could finish. They will never carry this bird into the air, but watch it enter the water. The transformation is immediate. The clumsy creature on shore becomes something fluid and fast and precise beneath the surface, chasing fish through coral and volcanic rock with a competence that flying birds were never designed to have. The logic is unsettling in its simplicity. On an island with no predators to escape, flight stopped being worth its cost. Wings require energy to grow, maintain, and use. When there is nothing chasing you and the ocean offers everything you need, that energy becomes a liability. So, generation by generation, the wings shrank. Not because something was taken away, but because something was no longer needed. And that is what makes the flightless cormorant feel like a message from a stranger's nightmare. Because it isn't broken. It is, by every measurable standard, precisely what it needs to be. It made a trade, gave up the sky to master the deep. Through the blind arithmetic of survival, repeating across uncountable generations, until the sky became a memory, and then nothing at all. Inland now. The shore gives way to dry forest, twisted trees, cracked earth, the kind of silence that seems to listen back. Watch the small bird land on a branch. It looks like nothing, the kind of bird you'd walk past without registering, until you notice the twig. It has picked up a twig, or perhaps a cactus spine, and it's doing something deliberate with it, something that takes a moment to fully process. It's using it as a tool. This is the woodpecker finch. It inserts its implement into crevices in the bark, probing, adjusting, angling, until it hooks the insect hidden inside and extracts it. In most ecosystems, a species facing this challenge would evolve its way to a solution over millennia. A longer beak, a stronger skull, some anatomical answer written into the genes. But the woodpecker finch didn't wait. It found a workaround. Researchers studying these birds have observed something that deepens the strangeness. Younger birds appear to learn the technique. They watch, they practice, they refine, which means the knowledge passes from one generation to the next, not through DNA alone, but through observation, through something that looks, at a distance, uncomfortably like teaching. What that means is this: evolution on the Galapagos didn't only change what these birds are. In this case, it changed how they think. It produced a creature flexible enough to solve a problem before biology provided the answer. On the Galapagos, that isn't exceptional. It's simply what works. And now, the one that crossed the boundary you didn't know was there. On the dry, remote outer islands of Darwin and Wolf, where food is unreliable and seasons turn hostile without warning, there is a ground-finch that learned a new trick. This is the vampire ground-finch. It approaches a Nazca booby, a seabird many times its size, with the casual confidence of something that has forgotten it should be afraid. The booby barely reacts. In a place where birds evolved without predators, trust became a default setting. The finch pecks. Once. Again. The skin breaks, and the finch drinks. The behavior almost certainly began as something benign. Finches picking parasites from the feathers of larger birds. A clean transaction, mutual benefit. The kind of arrangement that biologists find reassuring. But resources on these islands are not always reliable. Seeds fail. Insects vanish. The dry season does not negotiate. And in that scarcity, something drifted. A peck that went slightly deeper, a linger that lasted slightly longer, a small change that worked and was therefore repeated, until the behavior had traveled so far from its origin that no one looking at it now would recognize the thing it used to be. This is what evolution looks like without a moral framework. It doesn't recognize transgression. It sees only what survives. And here, this survives. Which may be the most unsettling thing. Not the act itself, but the mechanism. The slow, patient drift from harmless to something else entirely, with no single moment where a line was crossed. No sudden change. Just a long, gradual slide into the unrecognizable. It makes you wonder, what else can travel that road? And then, there is the one that simply should not be here at all. You see it before you fully process what you're seeing. A penguin, standing on volcanic rock, under a sun, doing everything it was designed to do. No ice, no snow, no freezing wind, just the equatorial Pacific burning down on a creature whose entire body was built over millions of years to hold heat in, to conserve it, to hoard it against eternal cold. And yet, here it stands. This is the Galapagos penguin. It's the only penguin on Earth that lives this close to the equator. Every adaptation it carries, the dense feathers, the insulating fat, the heat-trapping physique, is, in this environment, a liability it cannot shed. So it improvises. When the heat becomes dangerous, it spreads its flippers wide to bleed off warmth. It pants rapidly, the way a dog does. It presses itself into the shadow of rocks and waits for the worst of the day to pass. And when it finally enters the water, cool water, drawn up from the deep by the Humboldt current, it finds something close to the environment it was built for. But the margin is thin, alarmingly thin. A slightly warmer ocean, a shift in the currents, a bad El Niño season, and the entire species feels it, teetering at the edge of what the climate will allow. Evolution didn't plan this. It couldn't. It works with the present, whatever is here, now, surviving, and builds forward without the ability to see what comes next. The Galapagos penguin isn't here because it made a good choice. It's here because its ancestors arrived and stayed and changed just enough not to die. A penguin in the tropics. Not because it belongs there, but because belonging, in the end, is something evolution builds after arrival. Step back. Take all of it in. The cormorant that traded the sky for the sea. The finch that solved a problem without waiting for biology. Another finch that drifted, increment by increment, into something that feels like predation. The penguin standing in the heat like a misprint in the manuscript of nature. They are not exceptions. They are what the rule looks like, exposed, stripped of the concealment that usually hides it. Natural selection operates everywhere on Earth, in every species that has ever lived. Small variations appear in every generation. Most are neutral. A few are useful, and useful variations survive to be copied again and again until the population quietly shifts. On the Galapagos, 3 conditions make that shift visible and push it further than it goes almost anywhere else. 1. Isolation. These islands are cut off completely. Traits don't get diluted by incoming populations. They concentrate, intensify, compound across generations. 2. Scarcity. The environment is not generous. The pressure to find any edge at all is constant. And 3. The absence of predators. Without something hunting them, birds here were not punished for experiments that would have been fatal elsewhere. The flightless bird survived. The bold, tool-using finch survived. The unusual behavior persisted long enough to be tested, and some of it worked. Combine those 3 things across thousands of generations, and you don't get balance. You get a laboratory with no ethical review board. A place where evolution runs its experiments without restriction, without correction, without anything to say, this has gone far enough. You came to the Galapagos expecting birds, but you found something else. You found versions of birds. Echoes of the familiar, wearing unfamiliar natures. Like faces you recognize from a dream you can't quite place. And the thing that follows you home, off the island, onto the plane, back into your ordinary life, is not the strangeness of what you saw. It's the mechanism. Because the Galapagos didn't create these creatures through any rupture in what's possible. It created them through the same patient, indifferent process that shaped the sparrow outside your window. It just ran longer, with fewer interruptions, in a place where nothing said stop. And that's where the real chill sets in. If isolation and pressure and time can turn a flying bird into something that has forgotten the sky, if a harmless behavior, repeated across enough generations, can drift into something unrecognizable, then the Galapagos is not a curiosity. It is not an anomaly. It is a glimpse through a window that shouldn't exist, into the machinery behind everything alive. And the machinery does not stop. It is running right now. In this moment, in populations too vast and changes too small to see. Slowly, patiently, without asking permission. You have just left the Galapagos. But something lingers. The cormorant on the shoreline, the finch with its twig, the penguin in the heat. Like a question you almost understood. Like a reflection that didn't quite match